podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Welcome to Advental. We're so excited that you're joining us for this Advent series. We're going to talk each week about a different example of holiness and about how it's impacted our lives. And our hope is not so much that you'll learn more about these people, although hopefully you will, but it's more so that you might pick up something that strikes you that you can take back to prayer in this time of preparation for Christmas. And this first week, we're talking about Mother Teresa. And it's really cool because Rachel has some personal family connections to Mother Teresa. So she shares some stories with us, and we all talk about the impact that Mother has had on our lives. And we hope that it's really helpful for you. And we look forward to having you join us next week when we're going to talk about St. John Paul II. God bless. Hi, everybody. Happy Advent.
Happy Advent. Happy Advent. Happy Advent. I wore a purple dress just for this.
Oh, that's good. I'm wearing a purple pajama top right now. Does that count?
Nice.
I'm not wearing any purple. Oh.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
wearing white.
I was like trying to see if there's anything. I mean, white is kind of Christmassy, a little bit like Advent-y.
I do have twinkle lights in my room.
Oh, that works.
To the side. There are the yeah.
Yeah.
They're not on right now.
Okay. That's okay.
That's good.
Listen, your Advent is in the heart.
There you go. So Rachel's got the twinkly lights, and then I'm Nicole, so I have the purple pajama shirt, and Aaron's the one who came prepared with
with my purple dress. Which is, can I just say, mostly because every time usually I'm cold. I run cold, except for every time I do music at Mass on Sunday nights, I all of a sudden turn into a fiery furnace, and I'm like so hot. I'm like sweating. I'm like, what is happening? So I've learned never to wear anything cozy to Mass ever. Like, oh my goodness, never wear anything. So this is like a summer dress, and I will wear it, and in the hopes that I will not have like weird hot flashes while I'm leading.
That's craay. Maybe it's like the Holy Spirit, he's just like,
that's right, burning me up.
Yeah, inside out. Hey, right. Why not?
That's right. I love it.
But yeah, so yeah, guys, welcome to our Advent series at In the Thicket. So if you're a first time listener, I'm Rachel, and you heard Nicole and Aaron, and we are really excited to get into this series where we're going to be kind of referencing or talking about a few people that we think that have been very inspiring for us. Aaron, I think you called them like Advent exemplars.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain that? Like, what is?
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at an exemplar and we're looking at holiness, I mean, holiness is different for every person, right? But we have such a wealth of people who've been officially declared saints, but also people who just have lived lives of heroic holiness, even from other faith traditions, that it's like, especially in a time like Advent where we're like trying to, or are supposed to be trying to live holiness, like really intentionally in a time of like preparation and waiting and like intensifying prayer and things like that, then to have the example of like these exemplars of people is like nice. It's nice to sit with them as examples, and then also to ask for their intercession as well.
Yeah, totally. So we're going to start off this week. Each of us have kind of picked someone, and our secret prayer warrior has also picked someone. So we're going to do hers at the end. But we're starting off with my inspiration, I guess, who is Mother Teresa. I feel like there's some kind of cliche with Mother Teresa, like, oh, Mother Teresa, like cool, whatever.
That's right.
Yeah, she's Mother Teresa, and she's sort of ubiquitous as an inspirational person in our world, which is awesome. It's also awesome.
Yeah, which also kind of lose. Like, I'm glad that we're doing Mother Teresa, because sometimes if there's people like that are just it's like they lose a little bit of the depth of their coolness, because then people just think about Mother Teresa and it's like, oh, it's just about being nice, like serving the poor. Like, well, there's a little bit more to her than that,
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess to start off, I just wanted to share a little bit about kind of my personal connection
Mhm.
why she's sort of inspiring to me. She's really been like a figure in my life, pretty much all my life. I'm Indian, so first of all, like a lot of her ministry was done in India, and I was like, she died in, I think in 90. Shoot, I want to say like
It's the same year of
95,
John Paul
97.
too.
97 because it
97.
was like around the same time as Princess Diana. And my mom was
Yes,
like annoyed
that's
because
right.
Mother Teresa got overshadowed by, anyway.
Princess
Oh,
Di.
right.
That's so
Yes.
true. That is so true. But I remember both of their deaths really well. So I was
Yeah.
like a kid, and
Right.
and yeah, and it just was like, whoa, like it just was kind of crazy. Just I remember she was hospitalized and like lots of things. And so anyways, it was just so impactful to me, like the figure of her and the fact that we were kind of alive at the same time, and then she was declared a saint, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I was in, it's kind of insane when we think about it. Like a lot of us have been alive through John Paul II's pontificate,
Mhm.
and Mother Teresa's life, and like their saints, and it was just a really cool experience for me as a kid. And then because she's Indian, there's also some actual connections with my family, that my family's had connections with her. So I was just telling, I was at Friendsgiving last night. I was just telling the story, where so we have family friends who are priests in the Redemptorists order, and also a cousin priest in that order, my grandmother's cousin. And they gave retreats. They would often give retreats for the missionaries of charity in
Cool.
Calcutta. And so this one priest that we know really well saw her very often and was very good friends with her. So we have all these like cool stories. But also my mom, when she was 14, was with this cousin priest, and they were driving to the missionaries of charity to drop him off or something like that. And Mother Teresa was there. And so they all got out of the car, and Mother Teresa like ran down the stairs. My mom tells this story. Like she ran down the stairs, and my grandmother is like, Mother, will you bless my daughter? And so she blessed my mom. And
Oh,
so my mom's like this, like, third class Mother Teresa relic.
that's awesome.
Which is cool.
That's great.
Yeah.
love
And my
that.
mom was like, she was really kind of buoyant, and like she was like, still, she's quite old at that point, even though, I mean, she wasn't an old woman, but I think she probably would have been in her 50s. Like, but she
Right.
was, very energetic and like just joyful. That's how my
Mm.
mom described her, which a lot of people describe her like that.
Yeah.
And then another cool, which I don't know if I've told the story on the podcast already, but my grandmother was in Calcutta, and she was driving to the courthouse for something. There was some kind of thing, some family thing that was going on, extended family thing, and she needed to go pick someone up or something like that. So she was like driving to the courthouse. It was a really, really hot day, and she was in this like chauffeured car for some reason. And she saw these missionaries of charity walking down the street, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. Like, let's see if we can just drop them off wherever. And they opened the door, and one of the nuns was Mother Teresa. So
Oh my gosh.
Goodness.
my grandmother gave Mother Teresa a ride. And so,
That's so funny.
So yeah, there's like all these like beautiful little moments where my family got to, just be in her presence, and just like, and all my family's pretty practical. Well, my grandmother and my parents at least are really practicing and always have been. And so like this is always meaningful to them. So it was never wasted. They knew what was happening when it was happening, and they really kind of appreciated it. So anyway, so that's just really a few things. But for me, even in my personal life, it was like I had sort of my reversion moment when I was in high school. I never really stepped away from the faith, but I had like a crisis of faith where I was like, I don't know if God is real. That was sort of my thing. And it was very serious for me. Like, I really don't know, because that childlike faith had kind of slipped away. And it was, I was an adolescent, and I was like 16, and I was like, I'm praying, and I don't really feel like I'm talking to anybody. It just sort of feels like I'm talking to myself,
Yeah.
And it was a real crisis. So at that time, it was about a year of like really like trying to understand, or just working through this crisis. And she was so influential to me at that point, because we have this little book at home, which I think anybody can get. It's called Mother Teresa in Her Own Words. And it's just a book of like a collection of quotes from her on different themes. And I would just open it and read it like every day, just randomly. And her words were like, they were like arrows. That's the best way I can describe it. Like every time I read anything she said, it was like, as a 16-year-old, was like this arrow just kind of like really shot into my heart. And I would like instantly tear up like every single time, every night when I read her. And it was at this time where I was like, I don't even know if God is real, but what she said just bypassed that doubt almost. Like it was sort of like circumvented my brain a little bit and just went straight to my soul, like straight to my heart. And it didn't result in me being like, well, God must be real. That happened later through other experiences, but it sort of kept me open, and kept that openness, that mystery sort of like was kept inviting me through her words, which was really, really huge for me. And so when I think of her, it's actually like a lot of people, obviously, when you think of her, you think of her service and her, heart for the poor, which is so beautiful. Which I want to talk about a little bit for this, for Advent, but for me, it was like her love for Jesus was so palpable. Like even just reading her, it just allowed a love for Jesus in my heart to sort of grow. Which is also kind of Advent appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's really beautiful that you share, that her words spoke to you at a time where you were doubting God, like doubting God's existence, because now we know that Mother Teresa experienced this really profound and kind of unique dark night of the soul, dark night of the spirit for years and years and years. Where she didn't feel or have any kind of emotional or human sense of the reality or presence of God. And yet she continued to spend time in adoration every day and to do her work, right? So obviously, and the saints talk about sometimes if you're so close to God, it's almost like you can't see him anymore because you're actually right there with him, But it's not surprising that then her words that are coming out of this place of faith that's deeper than any kind of human sense could speak to you in that time, right? Where she's not, that's something you see, it went beyond your brain, went beyond kind of the normal senses of what you need and went straight to kind of some reality that's deeper, right? I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah. I feel like she's just such a, I love Mother Teresa, and I use like a lot of stories from her if I'm giving talks or things like that. But one of the things, and it connects to Advent really well, is the incarnationality that she talks about. Like because one of the things, one of the quotes that I love that she said is, how sad if someone comes to me looking for Jesus and finds only me. Which is like, and it was like through her, she was like one of the first saints or people that I really kind of understood incarnationality in the Catholic faith with, like that it's not just because it's not, she just didn't serve people to be like a nice person and to be like, it had nothing to do with that. It was like, I will be Jesus' hands and feet. I will be, and that all of those things came from the Eucharist. Like for her, it was so Eucharistic, everything centered in that. And like even things when a reporter was asking her like, oh yeah, so you're so busy and whatever, and on really busy days, like I know you spend an hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament in the morning, but what happens on really busy days? She's like, yes, it's true, I'm so busy, normally an hour in front of the Blessed Sacrament, but on very busy days I spend 2, like, which is so crazy to me, so it's really, and that exactly like you say, Nicole, like that all of those, that even in the doubt and the darkness and the suffering that she experienced, that would drive her to the Lord even more, is such a, and the fruit that bore, like just so beautiful.
I remember that particular quote about prayer and about sort of the God's time and our sense of busyness and time really impacted me when I was an undergraduate student. Because you're so busy in college, in undergrad. And like, and I remember it challenging me because that was my battle where I was like, wow, today, like, I have so much to do. I don't have time to pray. And then it always turned out that if I actually did pray, time somehow worked out better, this sort of, and so that developed a thing in me where I was like, okay, like my little quote in my head, I don't know if it's a Mother Teresa quote or just something that I like learned, is that there's always time to pray. Like there's always time to pray. And sometimes you don't have time not to pray,
Exactly. I think that's even a better, you never don't have, like, it's almost like if you want more time, like that's kind of her logic, right? Like if you need more time, spend more time praying.
Right.
It's kind of this weird, like there will be time if you pray.
Which is like every kind of contradiction in the faith, like the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Like the
Yeah,
paradox of the
totally.
cross, the paradox of how fruit came out of her dark night, the paradox of like more time in prayer when she felt nothing, you know?
Yeah.
Which,
Right.
you know, and you guys are talking about this sort of this huge, which was really kind of when she started the Missionaries of Church. So she had, for anyone who sort of doesn't know the story, and if you don't, you know, the book to read is Come Be My Light. That's kind of a book that came out 2008 around there. And you know, it publishes some of her personal writings and letters and things like that, that kind of reveal her spiritual journey that she was going through. But essentially what we understand is that she had these intense experiences of like mystical consolations and mystical experiences with God as a Loretto nun before she started the Missionaries of Charity, where God was urging her to begin this order. She leaves the Loretto sisters, begins the order, and then the consolations
Stop.
disappear.
Yeah.
The light
And
goes
then
out.
it's like 50 years or something, like
Yeah.
crazy amount of time where it was dryness, a lot of dryness in prayer. And like, I mean, I don't know if dryness is the right word for what she experienced, but like just this piercing absence sort of experience of not really hearing God. But, you know, she talks about like with a spiritual director who helped her kind of understand this experience as a sharing in Christ's abandonment on the cross, was entering and sharing into that. And so a famous words from her, like her focus is, you know, thinking about the thirst of Christ on the cross. So that's like a very famous missionary charity sort of image, you know, Christ on the cross saying, I thirst. And her desire to give him something to drink, like to be water for him, to quench that thirst. And I was just reading today in some quotes from her, like, you know, she says to her sisters, like, only if you draw near to Christ can you know what he thirsts for, or can you know his thirst, like, you know, like this intimacy with God that lets you know his desire, his will, his what he's longing for. And you know, when you're talking about this incarnational stuff, there's so many videos and so much you can like see of her. But I remember there's a documentary, something I watched a while ago, where she was talking to her sisters and she's like, the Eucharist is your spouse, like cleave. And she was using this sort of like marital language, you know, marital act. She was like, you must cleave to the Lord. And I think she says like a husband and wife, they cleave to one another, you must cleave. And she kept using that word because I think she was like, this is how real it has to be for us, you know, if we're going to do what we're doing, if we're called to this life, this is how real it has to be for you. And yeah, so, and just on this kind of idea, and maybe this is because I want to talk about like, how do we connect this to our experience of Advent? Like, what is Mother Teresa for me anyways? What is she saying? And there's a story I want to say and a quote. Well, I'm going to butcher the quote, but I don't have it in front of me, so I'm just
okay.
rephrase. The story is, I can't remember if I heard this from a nun on a podcast or from this priest friend of ours that knew her very well. But it's from a close source of hers. And essentially the story is about this priest, this other priest who came to help with the Missionaries of Charity. And he was exhausted because it's exhausting work. And he was like staying in his little room, and outside his room, outside the window, there's a man. And okay, so to give a little context, abject poverty in India is literally everywhere. So like you know, maybe if you're coming from North American country, you go there and you're going to be shocked. And after about 2 weeks, you can't be shocked anymore because it's just not possible. Like your body needs to stabilize, and it's just like, it just becomes the norm because it is the norm. So that happens to everybody, you know, it's just very normal experience. So that happened to this priest. He had been there long enough that like poverty was sort of like just part of the, you know, part of his world, part of the day. And so he's in his room and there's a man outside and he's like in pain or something's going on, or he's mentally ill or something. And he's just moaning and moaning and moaning like all night. And this priest is like, dude, I'm trying to sleep. Like, it's been such a hard, long day. Like, I need to get some sleep so I can get up at like whatever, 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. or whenever they get up, you know, or 6 a.m. So he's like just so exhausted and just so annoyed, and like is like, God help me, like I'm just need to sleep. And this man just keeps moaning and moaning all night. And then he can't sleep, right? So he's sort of restless. And about 4 a.m., I think, or 4:30 a.m., he hears this like vehicle pull up or something. And these people get out, and he hears Mother Teresa's voice. And she's like addressing this moaning man. And what she says to him is like, there you are, my Jesus, there you are. And she picks him up and she just puts him in the truck. And like this priest was like, oh my gosh, like it's the Lord has been outside my door like all night, and I didn't hear him and I didn't see him. And, you know, and it was like, of course, like we all understand what he was going through. Like, you know, he wasn't about like being scrupulous about his exhaustion. It was about the fact that what is it that the missionaries do? Like, what is it that Mother Teresa was doing? Is she was seeking the Lord in each human. And she says this all the time, right? Like he's looking for Jesus because it is Jesus. And the Lord says that in scripture. This is so scriptural. But for her, it wasn't an idea. It wasn't a concept. It was a reality. And that's what moved this priest. Like she wasn't being trite or like cute or like pious.
Yeah.
It almost just kind of like burst out of her in a sense. Yeah.
And part of it is because of this thirst, right? She had this chasm in her prayer life, and it wasn't filled actually by people. Like she still had the dark night, even when she was encountering these people, but it awakened this thirst in her to love the Lord so deeply that it just like, you know, kind of just burst out of her. So
yeah.
So that's the story. And the quote that I had read this morning was about how, you know, she says, basically it's a bit longer, but at the end of the quote, she says, we must face ourselves with Christ, and we must not be satisfied with a trite answer, a short answer. You know, you might like go deep, you know, go deep and face yourself with Christ, because and so those two things to me are connected, because it's only Christ who knows who we are, and it's only in him giving us who we are that we can then find him, you know, more in other people. Like it's this sort of interplay between the love of Christ that unveils us to ourselves and then makes us able to see him in, you know, in our lives. So to me, as we're approaching Advent, this is sort of what I was thinking about. I was like, the incarnation is really Christ revealing himself to us, you know, in full. But we need to be prepared to be able to see him, you know, so we need to go to him. We need to face ourselves with him.
Yeah.
And allow him to sort of direct our Advent, show us, you know, how to love, how to serve, you know, how to do acts of mercy and all of these beautiful things that we're called to do. But before we do, I think we need to just be like, be
go deep. Yeah.
Yeah. You know?
That's beautiful. Yeah.
I think I relate to that in the sense of Nathan and I have noticed this pattern that like sometimes when we go to adoration, if we do a holy hour together, or even if one of us goes and comes back, we often have kind of intense conversations after, you know? And there's this thought of like, and you know, maybe almost like not arguments, but just like kind of where all of a sudden you're like, oh, all this stuff, you know?
Right.
And I at first I was like, what is this? Like, why are we not just like more peaceful and grace after or something, you know? But it's like, actually that's the grace, because we're both there sitting in front of Jesus, and then all of us comes up, and then we're able to actually take steps forward and work through that and bring that up. It comes to the surface, right? So like that facing yourself with Jesus, it doesn't mean that it's going to be fun or easy, but it's freeing and it's life-giving. And that's where like realize, oh, this is how we grow, you know, together and all of these things, right? So it's interesting.
Well, and I feel like like Mother Teresa, the example of her is kind of like she's like a saint for crossroads, for the inner crossroads, you know, because it's like when we're saying go deep, and the Advent really is a time to go in. Like there is such darkness in our hearts. There is such darkness in our hearts. Like I find it in my own heart all the time, whether it's like related to sin or woundedness or like whatever it is, like there's such a darkness there, and it can be so disorienting. Like I feel like she's also a saint for being disoriented in a way, you know, because she had no inkling from the Lord, like no concrete direction really, aside from like love the poor, like, but it wasn't like she wasn't receiving consolations that were directing her everyday life, right? And so in that experience of being like going into that inner darkness and finding it very disorienting, she is a sure saint to be able to ask for intercession. And then also for that, because it is the crossroads, right? It's like we go in, we encounter this inner darkness in ourselves, and there's like one part of us that desires holiness and to stay and to be there with the Lord and to let the Lord do something. And there is also a desire in us to flee, like to just flee.
It's scary. It's
scary.
totally scary to face yourself sometimes.
Exactly.
And a lot of times.
Exactly. And so she's like her to ask for her intercession in those times, because she was so steadfast in like staying in the darkness and trusting, like for me this has like a significance for consecrated virginity, because even in the rite of consecration there's a lamp. I have, so I can show it, if you're on YouTube you can see it, but it's an oil lamp that I got from Jerusalem.
That's beautiful. It's like so wooden carved round.
It's like a clay. It's like a clay kind of thing. Yeah. So this is the actual one that I used for my consecration. So there's the wick from my consecration. It's a replica of what they would have had during the time of Jesus. So in the story from the virgins with the lamps, right? Like this is the lamp that something like that they would. It's tiny. Like it's a tiny lamp. Like whenever I thought about that story before, I was like picturing like a massive lamp,
like big
like
lamps,
a kerosene, like huge, massive thing, you know? I'm like, what kind of stupid person runs out of oil for that? Like that's got oil for like years. I'm like, oh no, actually, like it's like a tiny.
Keep filling it.
You have to keep filling it, you know. And so I use this for my prayer, but I always like, this is for me the thing that is like part of my vocation, is I need to keep my lamp lit, you know. And it's like, but because it's so tiny, it's such a little flame, it doesn't give off light, but it's amazing even from like one little tiny flame how it can dispel darkness.
Totally.
Right. So it's like the Lord will take these little flames that we have and lead us through the darkness, and it doesn't illuminate everything around us, but it's enough to keep going,
just one step at a time. That's beautiful.
I actually found the quote, and I was like, you know, I just should read.
Oh,
hopefully this is the thing that I freak out though, because like, you know, a few years ago we found out like not all the quotes that are from saints are actually from them. So I'm like hoping that
some
it
of
is
them are from the internet.
Yeah, exactly. And not from the internet. But I feel like even if it's not from her, I don't think I think it's very, it seems
Teresian.
like something. It's very Mother Teresa. So this is the quote. It says, if you were to die today, what would others say about you? What was in you that was beautiful, that was Christ-like, that helped others to pray better? Face yourself with Jesus at your side, and do not be satisfied with just any answer. And I love it because she also says, what was in you that was beautiful, that was Christ-like, right? I think beauty, there's also a way in which Advent is such a time of beauty, and there's so much beauty to kind of, it's different from Lent in that sense, right? Like it's a time of preparation, but there's kind of an anticipatory preparation of something like a birth, a joy. And so it's like, you know, there's the wreaths and the candle and all this kind of stuff. So I think like facing ourselves, there's some beauty that we can kind of drink from in that process also, you know.
And who was more beautiful than Mother Teresa? I remember looking at pictures of her when I was a kid, when she was really old, and her smiling and thinking, wow, she's just really beautiful. You know, this old, very, very wrinkled, kind of shrunken lady, but she radiated, right? Yeah. You know, and it's like, oh yeah, that's there's something deeper when we allow Christ to transform us like that, right?
Yeah, totally. All right, you guys. So thank you for, this is, we're off to a good start with a great first Advent exemplar.
And next week is a friend of Mother Teresa's, John Paul II. They had a really lovely friendship.
And also I want to say, for a resource in case anyone is kind of like interested in sort of going through all of Advent with Mother Teresa. There's a book, I haven't read it, but it looks pretty good. It's called Advent with St. Teresa of Calcutta, and it's Daily Meditations for Advent. It's by Heidi Hess Saxton. So
Nice.
Advent with St. Teresa of Calcutta. It looks good. I might actually get it. Yeah, there you
Sweet.
go. So
Yes.
we're going to go God wink time now.
Right. God wink time. So I have the God wink this week, which is, it's a little bit of a crazy God wink. I don't even know how to frame it. Anyways, so when I was younger, I really wanted to have curly hair. Like I really wanted to have curly hair, and I had straight, like hair that was so straight, you could not use a curling iron on it and have it last for more than an hour, like crazy straight. Anyways, so now that I'm getting older, I have, and kind of, so in my own vocation, there's also like a vocation to suffering that I have, like just for what I've experienced, but also just like this desire to have people know that that suffering is tied to love and to redemption, all these kind of things, right? Anyway, so this is like kind of a theme in my life always with the Lord. But then, so since I've started swimming, and I think getting older with hormone changes and stuff, my hair has somehow gotten curly. But like, so if I take it out of here now, it doesn't look all that curly because I've brushed it out. But when it's like wet, like it's definitely,
it's like wavy and
it's 100% wavy, even like this, and that's like brushed out, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways, so like when I was the other day, but every time it gets so frizzy and it's like hard to manage now. And I have never had hard to manage hair in my life. So the Lord is like, I'm giving you curly hair, but also suffering.
That's great.
Yeah.
Which totally makes me just like cackle laugh when I thought about that, because I was like, of course,
fits.
you know, it just fits. It just fits with, you know, what you get.
That's so funny.
In a funny way.
That's great.
Anyways, yeah.
That's awesome, Erin.
That's good. Cool.
Nicole, were you going to say something and I cut you off earlier? Just any last thoughts from you guys? I don't know if I cut anyone off. I have a habit, you guys, of talking very quickly sometimes.
I love it though.
I move.
Thanks for asking. No, and I have a habit of listening sometimes, but also talking. I guess that's why we worked well together on this podcast. Anyways, no, I'm good. Thanks, Rachel.
All right, cool. Well, there you go, everybody. Thank you for the God wink, Karen. I love your hair. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It is beautiful.
Thanks.
It's a thing of beauty. Happy Advent, folks.
Happy Advent.
And yeah, we'll see y'all next week.
Yes.
Bye.
God bless all. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of In the Thicket. If you like what you hear, give us a rating and hit that subscribe button. We have new episodes every Monday with more stories and honest conversations about life when the going gets rough, and the hope and humor amidst it all. We'd love for you to join our community on Instagram and Facebook at In the Thicket Podcast. While you're there, let us know how we can pray for you. God bless, and see you next week.